Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Monday, February 9th. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces a political crisis as he tries to persuade Labour Party lawmakers not to oust him from his job. Starmer lost his chief of staff yesterday and is losing support after revelations about ties between the former British ambassador to the U.S., Peter Mandelson, and Jeffrey Epstein. Starmer fired Mandelson in September after emails showed he maintained a friendship with the convicted sex offender. Police are investigating Mandelson for potential misconduct. Starmer's chief of staff resigned, taking responsibility for the appointment. And Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch says the government is too focused on its own internal psychodrama.
The Prime Minister is the architect of his own misfortunes, and all of the chaos and instability we're seeing is completely self-inflicted. This is a Labour psychodrama right now. We're all living in Labour psychodrama. I'm standing here in a pub that has been struggling with many of the terrible decisions that Labour has made, and they want to talk about their issues. They want to see a government getting a grip. Right now we have a government that's focusing purely on its own internal psychodrama. Enough of that. It is time for them to get a grip and start governing the country.
And the Reform UK leader, while speaking to reporters, suggested that Mandelson may have violated the UK's national security laws.
I also wonder whether, in emails to Epstein, he talked about the security apparatus that exists underneath number 10 and at the heart of Whitehall. That is information that is of national security importance. And so I think there is reason to ask the question whether Mandelson has not broken the Official Secrets Act. And I'd like to know whether Lord Hermer will be happy and satisfied for a prosecution to proceed on that basis.
Prince William and Princess Kate have expressed concern for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. The royal family is seeking to distance itself from revelations about the former Prince Andrew's relationship with the convicted sex offender. The U.S. Justice Department's recent release of more than 3 million pages of documents reveal how Epstein used a web of rich, powerful people to abuse women and girls. Emails appear to show that Andrew sent Epstein reports from a 2010 tour of Southeast Asia that the then prince took as Britain's envoy for international trade. Outrage is growing after a blatantly racist video targeting former U.S. President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama was posted on President Donald Trump's social media account. The president said that he doesn't feel like he needs to apologize. He says that he was not the one that made the mistake. He did, however, condemn that imagery. He said he absolutely does not believe that it is appropriate. But when asked whether or not he had a message for Americans across the country who were deeply insulted and offended by the racist post, the president said that he had no message.
Media post that you took down earlier today, the White House says that a staffer sent it. Who sent it, and are you going to fire them?
I looked at it, I saw it, and I just looked at the first part. It was about voter fraud in someplace, Georgia. There was a lot of voter fraud, 2020 voter fraud. And I didn't see the whole thing. I guess during the end of it, there was some kind of a picture that people don't like. I wouldn't like it either, but I didn't see it. I looked at the first part, and it was really about voter fraud and the machines, how crooked it is, how disgusting it is. Then I gave it to the people. Generally, they'd look at the whole thing, but I guess somebody didn't. And they posted, and we took it down, and we did it. But that was a voter fraud that nobody talks about. They don't like to talk about that post. We took it down as soon as we found out about it.
Mr. President, a number of Republicans are calling on you to apologize for that post. Is that something you're going to do?
No, I didn't make a mistake. I mean, I look at a lot of thousands of things, and I looked at the beginning of it. It was fine. They had that one post, and I guess it was a takeoff. By the way, a lot of people covered. If you look at where it came from, I guess it was a takeoff on The Lion King. And certainly it was a very strong post in terms of voter fraud. Nobody knew that was at the end. If they would have looked, they would have seen it. And probably they would have had the sense to take it down.
And last week, U.S. President Donald Trump met with Congo's president and has suggested that the U.S. wants more mineral resources from the impoverished African nation. Our contributor, David Clement, has more.
In a major geopolitical shift, the Trump administration is making an aggressive push to secure access to the Democratic Republic of Congo's vast mineral wealth, positioning the war-torn African nation at the center of America's critical minerals strategy. President Donald Trump rolled out the red carpet for Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi in Washington last week, hosting the African leader at multiple high-profile events as the two countries finalize what Trump calls the largest minerals deal in U.S.-Africa history. At stake are two critical minerals that power everything from EVs to smartphones: copper and cobalt. The Congo is a major producer of both, but here's the challenge facing Washington. China currently controls an estimated 70 to 80% of copper and cobalt mining operations in the country. The Trump administration appears determined to try and break that dominance. And last week brought a significant breakthrough. Swiss commodities giant Glencore announced a preliminary agreement to sell 40% of its Congolese copper and cobalt assets to the Orion Critical Mineral Consortium, a group which the U.S. government is now a partner with. The deal values Glencore's two Congo-based companies at approximately $9 billion US dollars. Oscar Lewandowski, CEO of Orion, said the transaction represents exactly what the consortium was established to achieve, securing long-term, high-quality production of critical minerals while supporting resilient supply chains for the United States and its allies. The consortium is backed by the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, or ADQ, a sovereign wealth fund from the United Arab Emirates. The mineral agreement is directly tied to U.S.-led peace efforts in the region. Congo's eastern provinces remain embroiled in a devastating conflict between Congo and Rwanda that has killed thousands and displaced millions. The commercial mineral deal was attached to the peace process between the two nations, though the fighting continues despite Trump's much-touted peace agreements. The timing coincides with another major Trump initiative, though, announced last week: Project Vault, a $12 billion domestic stockpile of critical minerals. Vancouver's-based Ivanhoe Mines is already in advanced discussions to contribute zinc and other critical minerals from its mine in Congo. Company founder Robert Friedland attended the White House announcement alongside President Trump. Now, throughout the week, U.S. officials showered the president of Congo with attention and praise. On Wednesday, he attended a State Department-organized critical minerals summit where more than 50 countries participated, but Congo was one of only 7 African nations invited. Notably absent from the guest list, Rwanda, Congo's rival in the ongoing conflict, and South Africa, despite its substantial mining industry and despite being a frequent target of Trump's criticism. Now, Tshisekedi also met with Secretary of State Marco Rubio to discuss both the peace process and opportunities for U.S. investment throughout the country. And on Thursday, Tshisekedi received perhaps his most prestigious invitation, speaking at the National Prayer Breakfast, a major annual political event in Washington dominated this year by Trump administration officials. President Trump, the main speaker, introduced Tshisekedi with an outpouring of praise, calling him a great guy and a very brave and wonderful man, though Trump appeared to momentarily forget the Congolese leader's name, referring to him as simply Mr. President. Trump told the audience, quote, "Together, he and I signed the largest minerals deal in U.S.-Africa history. It's magnificent land. It's incredible land. Some of our big companies are going in." But not everyone sees this as a victory for Congo. Some analysts are urging caution. A commentary published last week in the Review of African Political Economy warns that the minerals deal could weaken Congo's sovereignty, narrow its options, and restrict its ability to pursue independent economic and foreign policy agendas. The development marks a significant moment in the global competition for critical minerals, resources that are essential for the clean energy transition and modern technology. As the United States seeks to reduce its dependence on China for those materials, the Congo finds itself at the center of a high-stakes geopolitical contest, with its vast mineral wealth becoming a key battleground in the economic rivalry between Washington and Beijing. Whether this newfound American interest will bring stability and prosperity to a nation long plagued by conflict and exploitation remains an open question.
The story of Super Bowl 60 was written by the defense and also by Kenneth Walker. The Seattle Seahawks are the NFL champions for the 2025 season after a 29-13 win over the New England Patriots in a bruising defense-first showdown. Offense was hard to come by for most of the night. Neither team found the end zone until back-to-back touchdowns opened the fourth quarter, and there was only one more the rest of the way. The Seahawks sacked Patriots quarterback Drake May 6 times for 43 yards in losses, forced 3 turnovers that directly led to 2 touchdowns and a field goal, and didn't allow the Patriots inside the red zone until the final 3 minutes of the game.
Youngest head coach to win a Super Bowl. In the hands, Trevion Henderson trying to get to the sideline, keeps going to the 29, and that will do it. Seattle reigns above them all in the NFL. The Seahawks, Super Bowl champions for the second time.
He deserved that, Pat. What an incredible job he's done.
What a shot. Take it all in. Take it all in.
Thank you, San Francisco. You've been great hosts this week, but tonight belongs to the Seahawks and the 12s. 12 is a big number tonight. It was 12 years ago tonight you won your last Super Bowl trophy. So the 12s dominate. Jody, to you and your organization, to John, to Coach, to your entire organization, these great players, congratulations on the Super Bowl win. Take it back to Seattle. You're Super Bowl champs.
On offense, the Seahawks' biggest star was Kenneth Walker. The fourth-year running back finished with 29 touches for 161 yards, his third highest single-game total of his career. It was a performance befitting the player who carried Seattle's offense throughout the postseason, marking his third straight game with more than 20 touches and over 100 scrimmage yards.
Now, you know, Kenneth, this moment is funny because I heard you barely even want to break down the huddle. So now you got to talk on the microphone after winning a Super Bowl championship. But what was going through your mind and the mentality that you had to make sure that you were powering this offense throughout the game tonight?
First and foremost, I want to thank God for this, blessing to be here. Also, I want to thank my brothers. This don't happen without them. We went through a lot of adversity this season, but we came together and we stuck together, and, this is what we got.
Congratulations, Kenneth.
Thank you so much.
And last but not least, I want to bring up the quarterback.
Hey, shout out to the 12s.
Shout out to the 12s. Now, last but not least, I want to bring up Sam Darnold, your Super Bowl winning quarterback, ladies and gentlemen.
Crowds gathered in downtown Seattle where supporters danced and cheered, turning the city into a sea of blue and green.
How you feeling?
Oh, amazing!
What was your favorite part?
Winning, obviously.
The Super Bowl's halftime show, headlined by Latin trap artist Bad Bunny, sparked a wave of criticism from some viewers on Sunday night. President Donald Trump weighed in on Truth Social, calling the performance, quote, one of the worst ever. In his post, Trump wrote that the show was absolutely terrible, saying that it makes no sense. Others are viewing Bad Bunny's Super Bowl halftime show as one big love letter to his native Puerto Rico, wrapping up in a message of pride in his home and the Americas and an appeal for unity with the U.S. Before the end of his performance, he did choose to say one line in English: God bless America.
Paraguay, Bolivia, Perú, Ecuador, Brasil, Colombia, Venezuela, Guyana, Panamá, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, México, Cuba, República Dominicana, Jamaica, Haití, las Antillas, United States, Canadá, and my motherland, mi patria, Puerto Rico. Seguimos aquí. ¡Ahora sí!
Streamed opposite to Bad Bunny's Super Bowl halftime performance was Turning Point USA's All-American halftime show, which featured Kid Rock, and it drew in as many as 6.1 million concurrent viewers on its YouTube channel on Sunday night. First-time Olympian Hunter Hess has drawn the rage of U.S. President Donald Trump, just days after the freestyle skier spoke out against the administration's political priorities. Trump bashed Hess in a Truth Social post on Sunday, who said he has mixed emotions representing the U.S. at the Italian Olympic Games due to the current political climate. Trump's post read, quote, U.S. Olympic skier Hunter Hess, a real loser, says he doesn't represent his country in the current Winter Olympics. Ahead of the opening ceremony in Italy on Friday, Hess said that he feels like he's representing aspects of the U.S. if it aligns with my moral values, but made clear he's not the biggest fan of everything happening in the U.S.
It brings up mixed emotions to represent the U.S. right now, I think. It's a little hard. There's obviously a lot going on that I'm not the biggest fan of, and I think a lot of people aren't. If it aligns with my moral values, I feel like I'm representing it. Just because I'm wearing the flag doesn't mean I represent everything that's going on in the U.S. So yeah, I just kind of want to do it for my friends and my family and the people that support me getting here.
Freestyle skier Megan Oldham captured Canada's second medal at the Milan Cortina Olympics, earning bronze in women's slopestyle. The Parry Sound, Ontario native sat in third heading into the final run and locked up her place on the podium with her best score of the day, a 76.46. Switzerland successfully defended their Olympic title, posting a second round score of 86.96. Oldham's bronze also ended a long medal drought for Canada in women's slopestyle skiing. The last Canadian podium finish was at the event in 2014 in the Sochi Games, when Dara Howell won gold and Kim Lemaire took up bronze. American skiing star Lindsey Vonn has undergone 2 surgeries after breaking her left leg in a devastating crash just seconds into her run in the women's Olympic downhill. Vonn, who came out of retirement at the age of 41 in a bid to chase Olympic gold at the Milano Cortina Games, had already been racing against the odds. Just 9 days before the event, she ruptured her ACL, yet remarkably returned to the slopes for training runs last Saturday. Vonn's case has reignited debate within elite sport about who ultimately decides when an injured athlete is fit to compete, and what message those decisions send about risk, recovery, and the pressure of high-stakes competition.
First of all, obviously our thoughts are with the athlete and with this tough injury, but I think it's clear in the downhill we give athletes opportunities to train to make sure that they are able to go down the slope in the way that it should be for all the athletes. So that happened. She was able to train and made the choice with the excellent team that she has to take part. So from that point of view, I don't think we can, say that she should or shouldn't have participated. This decision was really hers and her team to take. She made the decision, and unfortunately, it led to the injury. But I think it's really the way that the decision gets made for every athlete that participates to the downhill.
A southern Alberta town has hosted a crowded benefit game in honor of the 3 junior hockey players who died in a highway crash. Late last night, a game between the Southern Alberta Mustangs and the Stavely Spurs alumni team was meant to pay tribute to 18-year-olds J.J. Wright and Cameron Casorso of BC and 17-year-old Caden Fine from the U.S.
I want him to be remembered as the good young man that he was. So He's always smiling, goofing off, joking. He's a pretty loud kid, but he liked having a good time. He wanted everybody around him to have a good time, and if you needed some help, he was going to help you. If you needed anything, he's going to help you get it. I'm happy to see the support. Tatum Perkins is going to wear Caden's jersey tonight, so that's the first thing. When I got here Tuesday, Tatum pulled me to the side and asked me, could he wear Caden's jersey for this game, and I loved it. So I get a very good player that's going to be honoring Caden and wearing his number tonight, and so that's nice. I'm going to miss seeing my son on the ice.
The amount of attention and outpouring of support that's come from across the country, it helps. And part of me can't help but smile a little bit thinking about these little buggers looking down saying, see, I told you, Dad, I'm famous. I'm up on the Jumbotron at the Oilers game. And I think they're smiling.
The sentencing of Hong Kong's one-time media magnate Jimmy Lai is raising concerns from foreign governments and right groups. In China and Hong Kong, authorities defended the court's decision Monday, saying it reflects the spirit of the rule of law. The 78-year-old democracy advocate was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He was convicted of conspiracy to collude with foreign forces and conspiring with others to publish agitating articles. And Federal Industry Minister Melanie Joly says by the year 2035, around 40% of the world's automobiles will be electric. She says the EV industry is gaining a lot of momentum and Canada needs to prepare for it. Joly also says her government's multi-billion-dollar strategy will help to protect workers' jobs within the automotive industry.
First, $3 billion to support our automakers, to protect jobs, but also to attract new investments. Second, we'll continue to put counter tariffs against American-made vehicles because the U.S. has put tariffs on our auto sector, but we will also allow more market access to companies that decide to invest here and actually build even more. And there are companies such as Honda and Toyota that since the beginning of this trade war have actually increased their auto production. So we want to reward them. We're also putting in place EV incentives, 5,000 for EVs, and particularly also those made in Canada, and 2,500 for hybrid plug-ins.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, Labour critic Kyle Seaback, and a local MP sent a letter to Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne calling for an exemption to the withholding of taxes that impact severance pay. The Conservatives argue taxes on a big chunk of GM's lump sum severance payments could deprive out-of-work employees of tens of thousands of dollars, adding insult to injury. The federal Tories said waiting until after tax season to recover funds is not a reasonable solution for workers who recently lost their regular paychecks and still need money for their mortgages and grocery bills. Investors are navigating a very different landscape than the one that defined the past decade, marked by shifting growth patterns, stubborn inflation, and higher for longer interest rates. In this environment, old assumptions are being tested, and portfolio decisions that once felt straightforward now require a more deliberate approach. To help make sense of the opportunities and risks, I'm joined by Tony Serio, President and CIO of Caldwell Asset Management, a division of Caldwell Securities Limited. Tony, thank you so much for the time.
Hi, Teresa. Thank you.
Now, where are we in the economic cycle, and which asset classes have historically performed best at this stage?
Well, I believe it's still in the expansion phase of the economy, more so in the U.S. than in Canada. But we're just growing slower than we had seen in the past, especially over the last 3 years. Inflation has cooled from its peak, and I don't think recession is imminent anytime soon. And generally speaking, in this kind of environment, yes, stocks continue to do better versus cash or bonds over time. But underlying is having some kind of balance between stocks, bonds, cash, and private investments that fits your overall risk profile. The takeaway, I guess, is that it's not an all-in or an all-out environment. It's owning the right mix of growth and stability in your portfolio going forward.
And how persistent are inflation and interest rates? And what does that mean for the balance between equities, fixed income, and real assets?
Yeah, good question. Inflation is definitely lower than it was a couple of years ago. Coming out of COVID, there was a pent-up demand to go spend, take trips because flights had been canceled, going to restaurants, and that drove price pressure going upwards. So inflation is definitely lower than coming out of COVID, but it's still here. It's not disappearing anytime soon. And interest rates are coming down, but they're still higher than they were pre-COVID. So, that means over the last 5 years or so, portfolios should be changed how they were built. If we were looking more specifically at stock growth, well, maybe now we should consider some bonds because they still remain attractive because of the higher level of interest rates. And you still need some stocks for growth. And of course, real assets, I mentioned private equity, for example, to help protecting purchasing power over time. The key is balance and not necessarily betting everything on one stock or one holding.
And why is it important to understand whether your current asset mix is aligned with today's opportunity set or still positioned for a market environment that no longer exists?
Yeah, a great example of this is technology and artificial technology stocks or artificial intelligence, sorry. The last 3 years that have been driving the returns for the S&P 500 US stock markets. So they call them the Magnificent Seven. And I see a lot of clients' portfolios that are still holding quite a bit of weight in, any one of those seven stocks. Maybe it's time to consider a different approach. And I think going forward, it's not necessarily, latching on to the wave that worked in the past. It's more being more thoughtful of where your money should be allocated. Reviewing and adjusting the asset mix ensures the portfolio would fit today's reality and not just yesterday's performers.
And why is diversification of a portfolio's return drivers more important for an investor rather than just the sheer number of holdings?
Yeah, that's a common misconception because people think they have diversified the risk if they hold 20 to 30 stocks, for example. Well, that might be the case. You are diversifying away from what's known as unsystematic risk, the company specific risk. So if you hold one company that goes to zero out of a total of 30 companies, you still have a lot of protection. But it doesn't get rid of what's known as systematic risk when the whole stock market declines. It doesn't matter how many stocks you have, you're going to be participating in that. So diversification in terms of the portfolio's return drivers means just not depending on stock performance to be the driver of return. Also look at bonds because bonds can help protect during a decline. And I mentioned private equity before. Private equity don't necessarily come with the same risks as investing in stocks. Their risks are more associated with time, because it may take a long period of time for a private company to cash out, let's say. But those risks are definitely different than the stocks, and bond risks are different than stocks. So diversification means introducing these different return drivers to your portfolio and not necessarily just being, having a whole portfolio contingent on one return driver and just being stocks.
And in a world of more modest and uneven returns, how much value will come from getting asset allocation right versus trying to time markets or pick winners?
I'm gonna parlay this to yesterday's Super Bowl. Trying to time markets or predict stock winners, it's a lot like predicting the Super Bowl outcome. And you might have a general idea that Seattle may win or New England may win based on who you're rooting for, but you can analyze all the stats and listen to all the experts and still get the wrong outcome. The importance is you don't need to predict every play or the outcome. You just need a strong team that gets you through the hard times, like when you're losing momentum in a Super Bowl game. If your team is strong, you'll see that through. And I parlay that to, again, the asset allocation. If you have a strong portfolio built based on your overall risk profile, you can see the ups and downs when the markets are there, and you help reduce those wide swings of your portfolio to a zone that you're more comfortable over a long period of time. So having the right asset allocation mix for your portfolio that matches your risk profile will help reduce volatility, minimize the drawdowns, and help achieve your overall rate of return that you're looking for over a longer period of time.
And what advice would you give to young people who are looking to get into stocks or build portfolios? What would you say right now with just how uncertain the markets are?
Yeah, don't go with what's the flow out there because you're going to get hurt. If you went, for example, Bitcoin at the end of last year, we saw a height of 125,000, and there was a sheer buying of that. And you see that just several months after that, be eroded by half. And that does happen. And we see that in the price of silver and gold having these big declines of 10 to 20% within a day. So careful just going with the hot item, the hot stock, the hot thing, and do a little bit of homework and try to understand what is your overall risk profile. Because once you understand what matters to you, if you're starting with an investment portfolio of $1,000 or $100,000 or $1 million, how much loss can you stomach on that portfolio? That will help you understand what your overall risk profile is. And then seek some guidance from an expert if you find it online, or speak to somebody, a professional in the industry that can match a portfolio based on your overall risk comfort zone.
A former Regina police sergeant who used the force's database to locate, deceive, and date vulnerable women has been handed a conditional sentence of 2 years less a day to be served in the community. The 53-year-old pleaded guilty last year to breaching trust and using a computer for unauthorized purposes.
I'm satisfied that it's over, but I understand a lot of other victims wanted to see more. I think for me, because I came forward first, because I've had a long time to sit with this, I've resolved it within myself. Whatever came out of today would be it. And the story's not over. The story is more powerful. And I think as a person who's worked in media, I believe the media holds the utmost power. We can create change. This is just one step. The story's not over.
I'm very disappointed, actually, in what happened today. I was expecting more. I think that 33 women deserve more. We were victimized. We were stalked. We were taken advantage of. We have ongoing issues, with our self-esteem and, with how stupid was I to let this happen to me, and this is going to continue. And he's going to sit in his house and he doesn't have to go to jail. And I think that it just says a whole lot to all the other police that, yeah, if we do this, we're going to get a slap on the wrist.
The Saskatchewan Court of Appeal has rejected the City of Prince Albert's attempt to strip property exempt status from a local church. The court rejected the theory that a church hosting a bake sale would jeopardize its tax-exempt status and recognize the benefit that places of worship in Canada provide. Our Western Canada Bureau Chief Hal Roberts spoke with Philip Forey, the lawyer representing Embassy Church, who has more of the details.
Philip, why would the charitable status of a faith community be called into question over a simple bake sale?
Well, thank you for having me. What I can just confirm is that it was not necessarily a simple bake sale. The principle was that the city wanted to revoke charitable status to the church and by implication to other places of public worship in Saskatchewan, if that place of public worship used its space to do secondary fundraising purposes, other than using it exclusively as a place of public worship, meaning that if you would do any what they deem to be commercial activities, including a bake sale, that in itself will disqualify you as somebody who would be entitled to property tax exemption.
Now, the court recognized the public benefit that places of worship really provide the community. How did they arrive at that conclusion?
Well, what happened is that the court did look at previous decisions. Interesting enough, the previous decision on this issue was a Supreme Court decision that was the Rodriguez decision in 1924 that looked to some of these aspects. One of the judges in the minority in that case particularly referred to why churches enjoy this benefit and made it clear that based on the history, that ultimately it is churches, this is not a favor to churches. This is something that is a public good, it's a public benefit, and it is not something that should be considered by government, by cities, as something as a favor. And a little bit of the history around that is because of, you may have heard of the halo effect, where every dollar spent by or contributed to a place of public worship is something that is deemed to be a public benefit because there's a lot of volunteers within that church that contributes to society in various ways, whether it's a food bank, whether it's contributing to the homeless, and a number of other charitable deeds that is consistently being done by members within those congregations.
Now, you say this decision by the Saskatchewan Court of Appeal is good news for places of worship all across Canada. Why is that?
The reason why I said that, Howie, is because ultimately this kind of legislation is not something that the court has looked at for a long time. There has been some cases over the years in the 1970s, in 1936, the Saskatchewan Court of Appeal looked at it, but ultimately the Supreme Court only looked at this very aspect around 1924. So it is something I think that other courts will look at if this matter ever comes before a court again, and is likely to be a precedent, not just in Saskatchewan, but also in other provinces as well.
Now, a poll conducted back in 2020 showed that Canadians are evenly split on whether churches should keep their tax-exempt status. Roughly 37% are in favor of keeping it, and around 35% are in favor of removing it. So let me ask you something, Philip. How difficult would it be for churches and registered charities in Canada if all of a sudden they had to start paying property and income tax?
Oh, I believe extremely difficult. The reason why I would say that is that we are increasingly looking at churches buying buildings that is not necessarily your typical church. And those buildings do require maintenance. Sometimes it would be, in the case of this particular case, it was an old co-op building where they had to essentially redesign and rebuild it as a church. And in order to keep the lights burning, in order to continue to provide the charitable services that they have, that requires some innovation, creative fundraising activities. And without being able to do that.
Philip Fourie, lawyer with Oakbridge Law and Mediation in Saskatchewan. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much, Al.
Police in the community of Coquitlam, BC, say more threats have been made towards local schools. RCMP did not say how many schools were targeted, but confirmed that authorities received more reports of alleged threats on Friday. It comes following a series of threats that were made earlier last week against 9 schools in Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, and Port Moody regions. Police say so far there has been no evidence of staff or students being at risk. A parent of a student at one of the schools says classroom windows were covered with paper and students were sitting on the floor in response to the threats. A First Nations leader says the BC government wants amendments that propose a gutting of its own reconciliation legislation. Robert Phillips with the First Nations Summit says the First Nations Leadership Council received and reviewed changes the province wants to make to the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, otherwise known as DRIPA. Phillips says the proposed changes are confidential for now, but at this point is a pretty much almost gutting DRIPA out. The legislation is based on the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, but two recent court decisions citing DRIPA have sided with First Nations on property and mining rights. As the war rages on between Ukraine and Russia, citizens continue to struggle. In Kyiv, Ukraine, residents are trying to find ways to cope with the blackouts and cold weather on top of the war.
Світла нема, опалення чуть-чуть гріє. Вночі сплю під товстим одіялом, шерстяним і під покривалом. Холодно.
Взагалі все не дуже добре. Світло майже цілими днями немає. Неможливо робити повноцінну роботу, навчання теж погано, все не можу підключитися. Там у нас зараз онлайн по навчанню. Інтернет теж не ловить мобільний, типу я не можу підключитися, нормально комунікувати, нічого не грузить. Теж, типу, я малюю, мені потрібно робити завдання свої на комп'ютері, і то теж приходжу сюди малювати.
And John Quinesso Sr., a World War II veteran, marked a remarkable milestone, his 100th birthday, aboard the battleship New Jersey in Camden. Quinesso served as a radio man in the South Pacific during the war, and after returning home, dedicated more than 2 decades volunteering as a tour guide on the very battleship where he celebrated his big day.
Happy birthday to you.
My most important memory I have of being on the battleship was when I was on duty, the midnight shift off the coast of Guam. We were getting ready for the invasion of Japan, and there were ships as far as the eye could see. And I was on duty, the 12 o'clock shift, when I heard a message coming from SINCPAC in Pearl Harbor. As I kept typing, I kept getting more nervous, because the message read, the Japanese had surrendered. The war is over.
I'm Teresa Skubik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Good night, Canada.